Dear friends, the Balkan Forum is starting today a series of discussions with academia, analysts and experts, civil society actors, diaspora and media representatives from Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Serbia, and EU member states. We will be exploring opportunities and challenges on various social, political, and economic issues with the aim of advancing regional dialogue and collaboration, internal reform, and EU integration and accession of the Western Balkans region. For our first topic, I have the great pleasure to welcome the Associate Professor Rade Rajkovcevski from the Faculty of Security at St. Kliment Ohridski University, North Macedonia, and Mr. Abit Hoxha from Kosovo, who is the researcher at Agder University in Norway, to discuss about the EU parliamentary elections and implications for the Western Balkans region. I'm using this opportunity to congratulate Mr. Hoxha and say to him happy birthday, and we wish you many more happy and prosperous years to come. So welcome to both.
Thank you.
Now, what we will do in this discussion, we are going to explore different scenarios and possible impact of the elections in the enlargement process regarding EU integration and accession and internal reforms of the countries of the Western Balkans. Also, we are going to look at the measures that may need to be introduced by the Western Balkans countries to build on the momentum, as well as to respond to possible challenges that the future setup of the EU Parliament and institutions may bring, including EU agenda and priorities in relation to the Western Balkans. The conclusions and recommendations from these webinars will be articulated into advocacy messages with national and international actors, namely government institutions in the Western Balkans countries, EU officials, including EU Parliament, Council, Commission, and the relevant commissioners. Mr. Rajkovcevski, Mr. Hoxha, we would like to explore what are the challenges and opportunities for the Western Balkans in the enlargement process after the elections that took place between May 23 to May 26 in the EU. And we would kick off with the first question. How big of a priority will be the enlargement or Western Balkans integration for the EU after the parliamentary elections that took place from 23rd to 26th of May 2019? So I would like your opinions on this one. Do you feel that the priorities for the EU after the constitution of the new, let's say, institutions there will change? Or do you feel that EU enlargement of the Western Balkans will remain high in the agenda?
Okay, I will start. I will just briefly saying that practically now we tested regarding the last meeting of the EU representatives of the EU officials held a few days ago. We tested the will of the EU for the enlargement, and now is pretty clear the message that they sent to our political officials in the countries, especially towards North Macedonia and Albania. So the dimension is, let's say, the message has a double dimension. The first one is the technical issues and the will of the EU for consistency in the enlargement process. And the second dimension probably is coming from the countries. So if we see the countries how they solve the main challenges, especially the fight against organized crime and corruption, reform in the public administration, democratization of the institutions, how the political authorities manage with the new scandals happened in the recent period, after especially in Northern Macedonia after the changes of the ruling party, of the ruling coalition. So we should be we should be, let's say, sincere and to say, okay, there are some challenges that we didn't solve in the recent period, but there are many challenges comparing with the other countries regarding the status of the other countries in the when we see the retrospective of the enlargement process, that many other countries they didn't deserve the start of the negotiation process, but in some cases I think that still it's lacking the consistency in the enlargement process, and still they are lacking the criteria how EU would like to be decent toward the countries in this process. So that is my personal opinion, because I know, okay, now we are facing with the problem in Germany. It's a technical issue, but in general, I know that in many cases, even when there were a lot of technical issues coming from the national framework for giving a support of those processes, EU found some common language, and they say, okay, you can go further. Now we are not talking about full membership, but now we are testing the EU will of starting the negotiations. I'm talking uniquely for Macedonia and Albania.
Are you saying, is this what I'm hearing, that the EU enlargement for the Western Balkans and specifically for Macedonia and Albania that was expected may take a bit longer and may not be very high in the agenda of the EU?
In Macedonia and Albania, especially in Macedonia in 2017, we know what happened on the political scene, and from that perspective, probably there are no lessons learned. Now we are just increasing the opportunities for an increase of the radicalization of the society, especially coming from the right wing. And in that way, probably this message is not a wind in the back to the current ruling party, and it makes a space for the opposition to return back. So, and we know that current opposition was a ruling party for the period of 11 years, and it makes a doubt how we can expect this political party to make some advancement toward EU once they had a chance for 11 years to make this country progressive.
Thank you, Mr. Rajkovcevski. Mr. Hoxha, what do you think? What's your opinion on the question that on the question that we just heard the views by Mr. Rajkovcevski? How big of a priority will be the enlargement of Western Balkans for the EU?
Well, first of all, thank you for birthday wishes and all that. I think I'll just look at it from more of a bird's eye perspective at this question first. I think that one of the bigger things that in Balkans we don't talk too much about in regard to European Union policy or stance towards the Western Balkans is the matter of Brexit. And Brexit has changed the European Union, regardless of whether UK leaves or not, on when it leaves. So nobody knows this and the answer to this question. So this has made the EU a lot more cautious on the steps to be taken on any level. The second thing is that European Union has never been a unitary entity in terms of policy towards enlargement. So there was always this type of problems with any enlargement sort of period. And I think by nature I was a little bit more pessimistic until now, and now I'm becoming more optimistic. And I know this sounds very controversial, but let me explain. I'm becoming more optimistic because this means actually that the countries in the region, in the Western Balkans, are being told exactly what to do, and the period of prolonging this process is coming to an end. So you can only postpone it as much as to some point, and then what I'm afraid of, what's going to happen after that, is that the whole region will descend into chaos in a way, because you have the Albanian question, you have the rise of right-wing populism, you have the Bosnian problem, and the European framework could have been a perfect sort of overarching peace project as it was in the beginning. But the failure to address this type of sort of approach in the European Union in a two-level decision-making, I know there is a lot of decision-making levels in Europe, but the two main levels, the EU and its member states, the failure to address and to become sort of compact in decisions has reflected directly in the region and in the way, first, the whole region behaves towards the EU. You have now a lot of people who will sort of, the sentiment, the anti-European sentiment will grow. That's first thing. Second thing, the anti-sort of joint regional efforts for security, good neighborhood policy, collaboration will decrease. And then what do? We go back in the 90s. That's my first sort of thought. And then second thing is the elections, the European elections hardly can reflect on this. I mean, they can reflect on the overall sort of the structure of the European Parliament has changed a little bit, but not too much. So not too much to reflect on, say, drastic change on saying, right, well, the Balkans does not belong to Europe. And that would be a period where the Balkans have to seek other alternatives, either in self-integrating into something or better collaboration. I mean, the whole Balkans is actually waiting for a European framework to better collaborate with one another.
And so what are your views? I mean, how do we make, what should Western Balkans countries do to create a new momentum for the enlargement? I think somehow, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that we lost the momentum, though we remain optimistic, but that we need to do much more to regain that momentum.
I actually think there was never a momentum, as many people say. It was always known that, you know, if you look at the little details, little things that are important in the European Union, like basic security, like good neighborhood policies, like this little good understanding of integrated border management. I mean, we could have done this ages ago. What prevents Kosovo and Macedonia and Albania to sort of do all these little things? So I think there was never a momentum, like a pivotal momentum to European integration. There was always this simulating of achievements in the whole region. So that's why sort of I'm becoming now optimistic that this has come to an end. So it's really the end of the road for the Western Balkans countries, including Kosovo and of course Macedonia and Albania. But for the whole region, it's the last moment to actually do things properly. You know, increase their own standards in the way, increase life quality, fight corruption, fight organized crime, fight all the negative aspects of rule of law. So I think the real momentum is really coming, and that is the crossroad where the Balkans will be in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, and if I'm hearing you, I mean, it was since 2003 or 4 that, you know, there was this phrase by the EU saying that Western Balkans has a clear European perspective. So on the one hand, I do agree with you that maybe there was never a pivotal momentum for the Western Balkans integration. And so why do you think then that we have come at a point that we will have to deliver, and therefore we need to do much more progress in terms of internal reforms and delivering on the areas that have been highlighted by the EU and by civil society and media in our region as problematic as the ones hindering the integration process, meaning corruption, organized crime, and you mentioned populism. Mr. Rajkovcevski even mentioned radicalization on the side of the society. And we see that the situation in Albania, particularly, for the last 3-4 months, and in Serbia with the protests, and Kosovo, where the parliament was not able to process a number of laws or government come to those substantial decisions, then what does that say to us?
Well, I think in the region, as far as I could see from collecting data and then speaking to a lot of people from focus groups and interviews and all that for the last 7-8 years, I think that this whole European integration thing was always seen as, you know, come to us, this is good thing, all that, but this is not about bringing neither Kosovo or Macedonia or Albania to EU. This is about increasing the life quality of the citizens of these countries. And I think the Western Balkans leadership generally failed to address this as, you know, failed to explain to the people that the rules of the game are much tougher when you're outside than when you're inside. So when you're inside, you'll have a lot more, you know, freedom of expression, for example. But it will be the court system has to work a lot better for that. You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying that you can have corruption in EU countries, but you can. Or I'm not saying that there's more corruption in EU countries, but I'm saying that, for example, the fight against corruption has to be a lot more systematic. There is a threshold for that. And the threshold is tougher than when you're inside the EU. So this had to be explained all the way from the beginning, that it's a tough game. The rules of the game are much tougher when you're outside. And we have to achieve that. And achieving that is not just an amplitudic achievement. It's not an achievement of a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a process. And it had to be explained all the time as a process, not as a competition that you win and you become member. It's not that like you become member of the club and then you just attend that club, but it comes with a lot of responsibilities, which I think, frankly, a lot of countries in the Balkans, including Kosovo, are not up to doing that. It's something else that, for example, the visa liberalization guidelines have been fulfilled in Kosovo. And yes, the rules of the game are different from Montenegro, different from Kosovo, were different from Macedonia. For example, Macedonia didn't have to do the name-changing saga for the visa liberalization, but it followed that on. So that's like the other way around. Kosovo, on the other hand, had to resolve the border with Montenegro, but that was a very important thing to resolve before the visa liberalization. And of course, then things change in the EU, but this all is actually, I see it a lot more as a bottom-up approach. It has to come, the European integration has to come from the bottom. We have to, in Kosovo, for example, we have to create conditions that are matching the European Union conditions. And that's not a drag, it's not a pull factor towards the EU. It has to be a push factor towards the EU, I feel. But I completely agree with Rade when he says, you know, radicalize. I don't think you mean religious radicalization.
No, in the political.
But political radicalization is very real. I see, just 2 months ago, I was in Kosovo and I interviewed about 60 people. And one of the things that people have started to think about is what's the alternative? So if EU doesn't want us, then what do we do? You know, we can go to Turkey with a passport.
And that's exactly the core of the question I think that we are asking. What if? Yeah. What if we are not high on the agenda? What do we need to do? And
Well,
I mean, maybe just to switch to Mr. Rajkovcevski, because we mentioned basically that
can you
know,
just
in the past couple of days.
This is something that I'm sorry, Rade, if I may, just for 1 minute. Just 2
Please,
days ago.
chip in.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, just 2 days ago, I tweeted that the alternative for the Balkans, the Albanians, and that's because of the data I received. The Albanians will think of, here's a chance for maybe joining Albania, or maybe demanding whatever. The region is stable mainly because at the moment there is this European dream. As soon as this goes away, then that's the real Pandora's box being opened. So and I even got like threats, proper threats from people from Macedonia, from people from Serbia for saying that. I was just, the region is still very fragile. Sorry for taking your time.
Part of political rhetoric, or is that a real opportunity, let's say, that, more those kind of right or extreme right parties are looking into?
Look, Astrid, in general, probably we should not go so far away from the region. So taking the experiences of Bulgaria and Romania, in this frame of Western Balkans, it's still Balkan. And going in the experiences of Romania and Bulgaria, as a conclusion, they have very strong. As Abit said, if you are part of the club, now you have very strong monitoring. So probably in that way we had some experiences when it was better to be out of the club and to have your own control over the national budget, over the implementation of the policies, over the I don't know, law enforcement strategies, and it was pretty easier when you are out of the club. But when Bulgaria and Romania became part of the club, they assumed that it's pretty harder, it's pretty heavy to have a control over the politicians. And then in the first 2 years, the first complaints from the European Commission arrived, and as a conclusion, now we can see after many years, but in the last 3-4 years, there is a real advancement in those countries. So we are not much different. So we can expect the same processes in the Western Balkans. Now we are neither in the EU, neither in the Balkans. We are in the middle, and probably we are still lacking, or we are still suffering from our mentality. And when you see the culture of the society, our politician, especially the political culture, is not so different. So we can not expect that our politicians have the attitude as the Danish politicians, because they are in some quasi political elite. But in general, the expectations are that this EU enlargement process from the domestical point is initiated by the citizens. As Abit said, it's for us. It's not for EU. If we arrive to certain standards in the health, in the public sector, in the social welfare, in the education, in many areas that make those states to be in the barracks, the social concept of the state. So we can expect some advancement. Now we are more or less similar. We have ruined health system. We have the ruined social welfare system. We have the ruined educational system. And the main issue, probably the main concern of the citizens is how we can arrive to certain, let's say, on the high minimum level. So in that way, probably the citizens are seeing EU as a partner, as an opportunity for make the life better. So, but from the other side, we are facing with the operational and capacities of the politicians and their skills. And on the end of the day, we assume that we don't have the capable politicians that are able to drive these processes. So I will again return back to the case of Macedonia. You can not say constantly that we are focused only on EU and NATO, and all other priorities must be beyond. So in that way, so we are expecting that I don't know, some maturing of the political authorities, and probably in that way to accelerate these processes. Okay, hypothetically, okay, we didn't start in June, we will start in October, as the problem of Macedonia is solved with Greece, and we don't have any open questions, open dispute with the neighbors. Probably next one is Serbia and Kosovo topic, and probably the final will be Bosnia with many questions. Probably the revision of the Dayton Agreement will be more than necessary. But in general, I hope that this meeting scheduled for 1st of July, Kosovo and Serbia, they will arrive to a certain point. But if they arrive to a certain point, they need something concrete. They need it's a kind of bargain process. So they need something concrete from the EU. What is going to happen next with Kosovo and Serbia? As you can see from the case of Macedonia and Greece, now there are not explanations why we don't go further. And probably this delay is becoming frustrating. Technically, we had waited for I don't know how many years since our first positive report on progress report. But from the other point, those let's say 4 months look very very frustrating for the citizens. The politicians they knew. I am more than convinced that they knew that the process will be opening of the negotiation will be delayed, because they knew. But in those society there is no transparency, there is no communication with the citizens, there is no consistent communication strategy from the government or other ministry PRs. So everything for us looks like a surprise. It's now we are committed to start the negotiation, and now we got a surprise that this process will be delayed for a couple of months. So in that way, probably we should learn how to manage with the expectations and to see the challenges internally, not to expect everything from the EU, but meanwhile we should work at home. So we have our homework, and from the Macedonian perspective, for the last 2 years, there is no one politician in the prison, and that was a strong message during the presidential elections. So that's why the citizens, they punish the politicians, especially the ruling party, because they didn't make any effort to put the politicians committed for the crimes. So meanwhile, there is no reform of the public administration, and which is also one of the main concerns, because all of us, the taxpayers, we are paying these robust public administrations for being, I will not say non-efficient, but it is totally non-efficient regarding to some EU standards.
Are we somehow, and sorry for being this blunt, but are we somehow being contradictory? Are we saying that, focusing on the EU agenda, meaning until now or until recently, we have had progress reports, and based on that, we could, meaning public and civil society and the others, could basically refer to the progress or lack of through those progress reports, or now changed into country reports. does it mean that what we were doing internally, meaning in those internal agendas, were being reflected in how quickly are we progressing towards the EU? Or was that not the case? And therefore, there is a lot of misunderstanding around how the EU enlargement works, meaning the integration and accession process works. Because I can hear you saying that bottom-up approach, and I agree with that, that is irreplaceable, and having an agenda that is country agenda, but not necessarily linked to the EU. Or is that something I did not understand clearly from your side?
Look, in general, the progress report is I don't know, it's more or less it's a technical report, but between the roles, the highest EU authorities, they are discussing, and it's just a form. So they can put everything they want, and they will find the arguments. It's not a problem. But on the end of the day, it's a matter of political will. And meanwhile, we faced, because we are still from this planet. So we know how they happened, the enlargement processes in 2004, 2009, 2014. So there was, I don't know, there was some closing of the eyes for some challenges. And we know that some of the countries, they didn't fulfill this criteria. And yeah, but in general, probably we know that probably frustrating. The main frustration is coming from the implementation of the double standard and from the hypocrisy of the EU officials. So when you analyze the speeches of Mogherini and Hahn, you will find probably 2 years ago, they had a lot of arguments. And now they are becoming soft because they are on the end of the mandate. So, but from that way, as we are talking about the administration of the EU must be consistent. Otherwise, it's a very, 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 very bad message for the citizens.
Mr. Hoxha, do you have any comments on the question that, you know, in terms of, are there contradictions on what we are saying now and then? Meaning not us necessarily, but what is basically on the political kind of discourse or public discourse.
Yes, I would like to pick up where you actually left with the integration and the bottom-up approach. And then many people see the European integration, as a linear process, almost like a prize. And then that's also the people in Kosovo and I guess Macedonia, Albania as well. It's like membership to NATO somehow. But EU integration is very different. It's not a linear sort of way of European integration. It's more like a vehicle to carry all the burden and all the problems and address them. So European integration is local. It's not about, I mean, yes, the politics of it, the writing of European Union in your passport, all that, but it's really local. It's making lives better. And that's where the contradictory sort of part becomes, because most of the leadership have, like political leadership of the Western Balkan countries, despite the fact that they've been in power for the last 20 years or maybe more, they have 3 to 4 year plans, and they always try to reinvent this wheel of European integration into winning. And that's why you get this win-lose situations, which shouldn't be the case, really. I live in a country which is not part of the EU, and nobody cares about the integration into the EU, or actually they refuse to integrate into the EU because of the good living conditions and because of the good conditions. And this didn't come from nothing. This came from hard, dedicated work. And what I'm saying is, I guess, that we are at the point of the end of discussing this European integration thing in the framework as it is right now. The Brexit, the situation, the changes, the rise of populism, right wing, all that. So Macedonia to start with, which is one of the most progressive countries in the region, and on all other countries, really came to a stage where they have to now, the technicalities of progress slash country reports and all that, the technicalities, the administrative technicalities have come to an end because they're fulfilled in a way. Yes, it depends on the political will, but the countries in the region should increase working at home and not just ticking the boxes. So integration comes from bottom up in that sense, not in the sense that, you know, the initiatives of people and all that. So the conditions have to be fulfilled right at home. I mean, the issue of trade, the issue of border management, the issue of, you know, demarcation, all this, there is no need for European framework to make these things better. So that's what I'm saying for this question.
Okay, we are approaching the end, and we have some more minutes in here, but you know, let's just go with the last question. And I would make a remark here. I think we are probably implying that when we are speaking, but you know, realistically speaking, EU is facing challenges. I mean, you are mentioning Brexit. One of them is Brexit, but also internal challenges as well. And then balancing that with inward looking with the enlargement of the Western Balkans, I would assume it's not an easy thing for them and new parliament now, and then new kind of institutions that will be constituted, meaning, you know, people that were there may not be anymore leading the enlargement and other processes. So that's one side of the story. But the other one is like being more concrete on what we can do, basically trying to bring this to personal level. But what can academia, meaning you yourselves, researchers, analysts, do to aid this process, to support the progress in our countries? And meaning with doing that, advancing this Euro integration process for us?
Astrid, I will just say there are two examples, two very, very basic examples. The first one is, I already mentioned previously, it was the matter of transparency. So from the matter of transparency, we are not sure where the government is lacking regarding to the teams, the negotiation teams. Hypothetically, if we start the negotiations in October, probably they are going to begin in next year. But in general, it comes to the second point that a few months ago I had a conference. I had some kind of, it was more interactive discussion with the representative from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and through the diplomatic club we discussed about the status of our teams, for our negotiations teams. And my question was simple. I said, okay, hypothetically, if we start the negotiations, do we have the teams for starting the negotiations to negotiate with the EU authorities? And they said, yes, but for some chapters, some members of the teams, they are lacking. I said, okay, and how we can fulfill these teams with the most competent people? And they said, now we are doing the efforts to fulfill the team with the competent people. I said, okay. And I said, what kind of approach are you using now? And I assume that I didn't see any public announce for fulfilling these teams, for completing these teams. And I assume that they are looking in the political party local organization, and the recruitment process is passing through to the political party clubs. So even, and when you see the current status, you see that even at the highest level, we don't have. I'm talking about the first echelon of the executive government, of the ministries, especially Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I cannot recognize that they are able to start the processes, and moreover, they are not able to recruit the right people at the right place at the right time. So in that way,
I think that can be done.
I think that, look, Astrid, probably in 2005 when we gained the candidate status, we had, I don't know, probably we had the best people at the right place in the right time. But now I cannot recognize the same situation, because more or less a lot of people left the country, or more or less a lot of people left the institutions. So, because we are talking about concrete profiles, this profile is not a tough job.
Questioning the capability of government.
Yeah, because it's not a tough job. It's if you need to do some profile of those persons, probably because now we are talking about something that was expected in the last 3 years or 2 years at least. So, and profiling of these people is a process, and they had to know this, that if we are going to negotiate, if we are going to solve the name, it is expected that we are going to start the negotiation processes. And number of people should be, they had to be sent abroad and to pass through the learning processes. Not abroad in Sweden, in Germany, but in the neighborhood, especially in Romania, Bulgaria, in Croatia, in Slovenia, Czech Republic, Slovakia. They are the good example how they realistically transform the societies. And according to my information, I don't have any info about this. So everything is, it's we are just stressed and we are waiting. And that is the approach of the government. And probably this situation could seriously affect the duration of the negotiation processes.
Thank you, Rade. Mr. Hoxha, what can academia, what can researchers, what can civil society do to support, to contribute to more progress in our countries, realistically speaking?
Yeah, allow me to sort of come into this discussion from two perspectives, and one is a more international perspective of this, and looking at my research basically focuses on European troubled past and media, and how media reports and is influenced by the past. So I'm looking at Spain and Cyprus and Greece, Kosovo, Bosnia, Poland, and Germany, and all this media and journalistic culture, and how are they reporting about the past. And we tend to forget, and the European Union tends to forget, for example, that Spain has only been, a democratic country from 1981. It's been a dictatorship before, and how this is dealing with its past, and where did Spain come to, which stage did it come to now in the EU? And I think that that's one of the contributions that can happen is to look at the cases of Ireland, for example, and the Good Friday Agreement, and how this conflict was resolved for, I don't know, for decades. There was no problem. There was little problems, but no major problem and fights. So I think that things have to be seen from that perspective, and the academics can contribute a lot by bringing this into the central narrative of what is European integration about. So that's one thing, and the other thing is the other perspective is the one I think I agree with. We both agree with, rather, that it's the bottom up, but not the classic bottom up what people say democratic, because European integration is not about it being a democratically elected process, but it has to be, the approach has to be from the bottom up. And I was just asking people in Kosovo, and this is very locally based sort of research-based finding. I was asking people in Kosovo in focus groups, so what does EU mean for you? And the EU for people in Kosovo means basically better education, better health, better services, no corruption, more freedom. And the politicians and we as academics should emphasize this a lot more in the public narrative of European integration. And this is not about integration, is not about clicking or connecting our values to European values, but it's about increasing our life standards. So we should bring this into the narrative a lot more. And I think as academics, we have to team up a lot more with media in terms of not focusing only writing academic papers and journals and all that. We need that for our job and for our, grades, but we need to team up with academia, with media and with civil society to bring in more down to earth, this type of results that will reflect in the decision makers, and it will reflect also in more informed decision making in the elections. So I'm not saying we should sort of influence elections, but we should provide more choices of information in terms of information for the people. In that sense, I think that especially I want to emphasize the media role in European integration, and we have seen a revolution of news production, of ways news comes into being. Especially in Balkans, the Macedonian case, we know what happened with the United States elections. Kosovo case, we know the potential for fake news there, the BBC reports, and we know also other things, the recruitment of foreign fighters and the media influence on that, and the democratization of media in the sense that anyone can produce news and without filters and all that. So what media should do is go really revisit the basics, the role of media in society, and that is to scrutinize and to check and report corrupt politicians and wrongdoings of the political elite that is being paid by the taxpayers' money. So I think that media role has decreased in a way because of the way media is produced now. People just take a picture with a phone and they publish it, and that's not important, and that becomes yesterday's news, which is not news anymore. All this, but media has to go back to the basic and really do the systematic, in-depth reporting. And I always say when I train journalists that journalists should be some type of prosecutors in a way, so their words have to have really good stand or good basis.
Thanks, Mr. Hoxha. Thanks, Mr. Rajkovcevski. Just before we conclude in about a minute, is there anything quickly that you would like to say that you probably or maybe did not have the opportunity to during these 45-50 minutes?
Personally, I would like to wish a good luck to the Kosovo-Serbia negotiations that are going to be held together with French and German Chancellor, French President and German Chancellor. So we as a Balkan, probably comparing with other critical regions, not probably neighboring regions, but comparing in some regions in the Eastern Europe and Caucasus, it is more than obvious that there is some kind of progress. It's slow, but there is a progress. So this kind of message we should send to the Europeans, that we are part of the family and we are willing to go further. It's a big fight. Probably it's a big fight, but uniquely with our mentality, because we are trying to resist to everything, and on the end of the day we will adopt everything. So, but it takes a time. Now, in many cases, probably the time lost in the cases of the Western Balkans will never return back, and we as citizens, we must become more rational, and our politicians must grow up very quickly. Otherwise, we will be blocked here in this area, And this issue with the depopulation is becoming more and more serious. Probably they are going to negotiate with between countries, but they will negotiate for who? Especially if all the citizens they go abroad. They will be not there will be no subject of the negotiations, because the negotiations are they are doing the negotiations for the people, for the citizens, and probably now they will stay alone. They are going to negotiate for their own and for nothing else, no one else.
Thanks, Rade. Thanks very much, Mr. Hoxha.
Yes, I'll pick up where Rade stopped. Actually, it's with a fresh agreement. There is a glimpse of hope now that it's Kosovo's turn, because that's the only open major conflict left in the Balkans. We have Bosnia as well, but that's a different type. That's in its own. It's very sort of contained, and I'd like to. I agree with everything what Rade said about the dialogue and the negotiations between Kosovo and Serbia. One thing that I hope that in future we'll see more is the regional approach, and then the joint efforts to progress. Joint efforts of, let's say, Macedonia and Albania, and trying to basically take onto the shoulder of Kosovo as well, in the sense that we have capacities that we can share. We have the need for this shared capacities in the region, and we should have a little bit more of a regional approach. And I think that you're right, Rade, when you say that compared to other regions, problematic region. My research is on Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa as well. So kind of Macedonian and Kosovo question is the mild version of conflict. But I think that we have a really good chance of good work and integration here, because of almost a consensus in the region on human rights, on Europeanness, if you want to call it that way, of the European values. And I think even the very far right radicals agree that we are part of Europe. It's just we disagree on the way and on the shape of Europe, and what does it mean, you know? So let's. I would like to see in future a little bit more sort of this regional and integrative approach, since we're all, you know, part of Europe and we disagree on the nuances of Europe. Let's sort of tone down that. And if we look at European Union and integration process as a process, not as an achievement, I think we can leave these nuances a little bit behind. And once you're in the European Union, you can then have that regional identity of being, you know, from Prespa or from Manastir, from Bitol or from Kumanovo or from Drenica or from Mitrovica, a lot more, and that's not a big problem. So, but for the moment, we have to just have the regional approach to move on, I think.
Thanks very much to both of you. Thanks, Mr. Hoxha. Thanks, Mr. Rade Rajkovcevski, for the valuable views and analysis for this discussion. We realized that there was a big question in front of us. The situation is complex, and of course, it requires more discussions here and in public, and also in the political discourse, to grasp with the situation, but of course, bring the EU closer to the people, as you said, bring more clarity what European integration means, and what bottom-up approach and improving the quality of life means for us as well. And then, you know, ending with a positive note is something that we would like to do, not now, but in the future as well. So thanks very much, and I look forward to welcoming you in future discussions on other topics as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Have a good day. Thanks.
Thank you. Equally.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Rade.
Yes.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Thanks, Abit, very much.
Oh, no problem. I only got the invitation a little. Maybe we should have been more sort of the invitation just yesterday or day before yesterday. Is it still live on Facebook?
Okay, see you guys. Thanks very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You're welcome. Bye.